Hello and welcome. This is the Market Wrap. I'm Agam Vakil. Well, we've seen the benchmark indices take a step back with about a 40-point decline as far as the benchmarks are concerned, with the Nifty, well, coming off by around 39 points to be precise. But Sun Pharma is the big gainer in today's day of trade. We are going to be talking about that in a little more detail, followed by Wipro, again up as much as 3%, and Titan, Kotak Mahindra Bank following through. We have some weakness, however, in something like a Vedanta, which is down 3.6%, Tata Steel. In fact, a lot of weakness in the metal sector in general. JSW Steel also down 2.5%. Z Entertainment, Mahindra and Mahindra among others. To talk about the broader market index, we have nearly 2 gainers for 3 losers. Info, it stands out in trade. It's seen a little bit of a strength pickup, specifically, particularly in the last 1 hour of trade. Phillips Carbon Black makes a recovery as well, up nearly 7%. We have Strides, Pharma, Interglobe Aviation, of course, very strong ahead of earnings. Interglobe Aviation will announce earnings tomorrow. And Havells India on the back of earnings. Mindtree, Jubilant Life Sciences and Future Retail all advancing in trade. On the losing end, we have weakness in Deepak Fertilizers, ITI and Blue Dart Express. So it's been a fairly mixed movement when it comes to at least the broader markets, but we do have strength in as much as we have weakness coming through. But let's get in a perspective here. Our markets editor Neeraj Shah is here to speak to us. Neeraj, what are your thoughts about the trading session today?
Weekday characterized by very weak market breadth. So the cash market volumes were about 32,000 crores, so much higher volumes than average. But the market breadth, and deceptively so, Agam, because the mid cap and the small cap indices were just down about 0.25% and 0.13% respectively.
Right.
And yet the market breadth was almost 5:2 in favor of the decline. So it's an unusually weak day, more so at the broader end of the spectrum. And it was evident in the way select stocks took a beating. Prabhat Dairy case in point, I'm sure you'll be talking about it in greater detail later on. But was just one of those examples, some metal names, autos and metals by and large, the weakest points in the session today. The only good part or the bad part, depending on how you look at it, is that both IT and banking, which are the heaviest sectors, 45% of weightage, haven't quite cracked despite reaching resistant points. So let's see if they put in some pressure on the markets, because remember, the world futures weren't particularly happy place. They were not too down. They're not particularly happy place. So they will have some bit of bearing on what we do in the session tomorrow as well. But all in all, fairly lackluster day of trade. No key takeaways, but for the fact that it looked very weak and on fairly high volumes.
Right. Well, Neeraj, thank you for bringing us that perspective there. So, well, fairly weak on high volumes. That's the big takeaway for today's day of trade. But what about the technicals? What levels are we watching out for? This is what technical analysts are saying. Listen in.
On the upside, Nifty seems to be technically capped around the 11,000 mark, because if you look, yesterday's high was 10,987. So clearly reflecting that the trend remains positive, but higher levels would meet with selling pressure. But yes, on the downside, any correction can be used as a buying opportunity. So Nifty futures, one can definitely look at around 10,880, 890. That can be a good level to buy, with a stop loss at 10,830 and a target of 10,975 on the upside.
I think this is a good time wherein Nifty Bank can be utilized. We expect that this particular move can extend right up to say 27,700 in the coming week. So with that expectation, a stop loss should be placed somewhere close to 27,310 on a closing basis, and longs can be considered now in Bank Nifty. We expect the banking stocks to again take it from here, and the leadership would be again evident in some of the banking and financial sector.
Okay, then let's talk about stocks. And the first stock on the Nifty 50 is the Sun Pharma. It's seen a little bit of recovery, and it is also the top gainer in today's day of trade. What are the updates here? We have Darshan Mehta to take us through that. Darshan, what is the newest?
Yeah, so they gave a lot of clarification, at least on 4 points, which were needed post, the conference call that they had and the recent whistleblower issue that happened. So the first point they spoke about Aditya Medisales. Earlier also, the Lipsang had said that, if the investors want, they will acquire the company at cost, and that's something that they've said. They haven't indicated at what price this deal will happen, but they have indicated that from being a related party, it will be a wholly owned subsidiary. Secondly, he clarified finally on the beneficiary of the 2,300 crore loan that they're given. So Atlas Global was the company in which they gave a loan. So initially what had happened was, because of a case lost, Sun Pharma had to pay this much amount to Pfizer, which this company said that they will pay on on the condition that Sun Pharma will supply drugs to them at a cheaper rate. And when that did not have, and Halol went under, the FDA issue, they were not able to sell, and that's why Sun Pharma had to give them a loan in lieu of that. So they're saying that they will return this loan and they will nullify this transaction. The conditions are still not known. So that is something that was positive. The other one was the change of directors. And finally, in terms of Suraksha Realty, again, it was reiterated that there is no guarantee or no loan or no relation to Suraksha Realty. Suraksha Realty is a firm that is owned by Dilip Sanghvi's brother-in-law and the executive director of Sun Pharma, Sudhir Walia. So a lot of clarifications that were needed came out, but still there are some more questions that are left to be answered. But nevertheless, the market liking the fact that Sun Pharma is finally coming out and giving a bit of clarification.
Absolutely, some damage control there. Darshan, thank you for joining us and getting us those details. The other stock that I wanted to address was, of course, Prabhat Dairy. Well, what a dramatic day of trade for Prabhat Dairy, considering it rose by as much as 20%. In fact, it was locked in an upper circuit of 20% and eventually closed the day with losses of 15%. That's a 35% gyration on this particular stock. Now, one may ask why. Well, as we all know, it's going to sell 98% stake in its dairy business. Or rather 98% of its revenues which come from the dairy business, that particular business will be sold to Lactalis, which is based in France. The problems are a lot of uncertainties with respect to the deal. What is going to happen to the funds? How are they going to be dispersed to the shareholders? If they are not going to be dispersed to the shareholders, how are they going to be used for what businesses? Is it going to be a combination? There is a lot of, would I say, confusion with respect to the prospects, the future prospects of the company, as well as its cross-holdings in various subsidiaries, and what part of that particular business will be entitled to shareholders going in. So a lot of questions, a lot of conjecture around this particular stock, and that has actually led to severe weakness in Prabhat Dairy in today's day of trade, starting off with the high. And as my colleague would like to point out, he would say high equals to open. Well, it eventually closed down by as much as 15%. And speaking of that colleague, let me bring in Yash Upadhyay for Asian Paints earnings too. Yash, good afternoon. How are Asian Paints earnings looking?
Afternoon, Agam. So the expectation was really very high from Asian Paints, and the second half of the year tends to be strong for paint companies. And with the full of the festive season playing out in the third quarter, the expectation was very high, and the fact that Asian Paints managed to deliver on those expectations. So the revenue that has grown by about 24% to 5,294 crore rupees. That came ahead of the street expectation of 4,886 crores. Net profit growth of 15%. Margins are more or less stable at about 20%, just about 90 basis point contraction on a year-on-year basis. Gross margins, they have come off a bit, but that is on account of the increase in raw material prices. We have seen crude oil prices cool off, but on a year-on-year basis, they are still higher by about 20%, according to one of the reports from the brokerages. But the quantum of price hikes that the company has taken in the third quarter, that has managed to partially offset that, is why that we are seeing a very minimum impact on the margins. Similarly, the net profit, as I said, is up 15%, and EBITDA is up 17% as well. The key number apart from that was the volume growth in the domestic decorative paint business. We were working with a 14 to 15% kind of growth there. The management doesn't give an absolute number, but they have indicated a high double-digit volume growth in the domestic decorative paint business, which is a big positive. Sure. The only negative that I would say is the fact that they have said that there is a subdued outlook for the industrial paint business, which hasn't done very well because of the slowdown in auto sales. But overall, a good set of numbers, managed to beat all of the street expectations. Okay,
fair enough. Of course, Asian Paints ended the day with losses of 1%. Strong earnings, but this is likely to do with some profit taking after we see earnings come through. Yash, thank you for joining us and taking us through those details. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of the Market Wrap. Lots more lined up. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.